Heading into the season, both Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson talked about bringing in competition at the left tackle position. The Chicago Bears didn't do that in the way that many Bears fans were thinking, but Ben Johnson is still preaching the fact that there will be a competition for the Bears starting left tackle. We'll talk about it all and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
What's going on, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. I'm the host, there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Chi Bears Central on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it for today, y'all. And we're going to start off talking about the tackle position, right? This was a position that many people wanted to see addressed, of course, right? And while the Bears didn't get the level of tackle that some of us thought that we would, the Bears still went out and got a tackle, right? On top of, with Kieran Amagaje, and apparently there's still a lot of belief in him, as there should be, only heading into his second year after being a really raw prospect last year. There's undoubtedly some competition there for Braxton Jones. Now, I don't think that the Bears brought in competition where they're clearly heads and shoulders above Braxton Jones, but it is going to be something that the team is going to take a look at. And it really comes just down to Braxton Jones and where he hasn't developed at, right? I've been one of the guys that have said consistently that Braxton Jones isn't nearly as bad as some Bears fans make him out to be, but he still does have some pretty big shortcomings that leave it open. One of the biggest reasons for me, outside of anything on the field, for Braxton Jones as well, is that he's up for a contract extension at the end of this year. Starting left tackles get paid in the NFL. And because of that, I don't necessarily see, unless he has an amazing season, Braxton Jones coming back, because I just don't think with his inability with the bull rush, with the penalties, that the Bears have seen enough from him to give him a contract extension yet. Now, with the upgrades across the offensive line with Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman, as well as, Darnell Wright, who he's not losing his starting position anytime soon. It's really put a spotlight on how Braxton Jones can develop with the Chicago Bears team and with a better offensive line coach. That's what we're looking to really see when it comes down to this one. But Ben Johnson was asked about the starting left tackle position and the competition there. And his exact words in regards to the competition at the left tackle says, that'll be an interesting one. We'll get together with the staff after the weekend and assign where we want guys left or right. Now, we talked about Kieran Amagaje. The Chicago Bears also brought in Azie Tripillo, who has been a career right tackle, even though he's played at left tackle some as well. And Kieran Amagaje. It's really what it comes down to, right? Now, Braxton Jones, as we know, is recovering from a fractured fibula, which it seems like he got the brace off almost about a month ago. But he will be a little bit limited in training camp, right? And that limited ability in training camp is going to give coaches a ability to really look at Luke Newman, who we brought in here as well, Azie Tripillo, Kieran Amagaje, to see how much Kieran has stepped up from years 1 to year 2. And that could be something that really offers a chance for somebody to pass up Braxton Jones, right, when it comes down to it. Am I as certain as Braxton not being the left tackle as maybe I thought I was going to be coming into the season? Not necessarily, but I do think another added wrinkle into this is the fact that the Bears have talked about moving Darnell Wright to left tackle. Now, that's something I don't want to see. I don't want to see that. But I will think this. If there is a move of Darnell Wright to the left tackle position, to me, that's a bigger indication that they're probably thinking about starting Tripillo. Now, I don't know, or maybe even Kieran Amagaje, but there's looking to make a change, and Braxton is not part of that change as far as that starting lineup, if that ends up being what they're doing. Again, I'm not saying that that's a certain thing. I'm just looking at the tea leaves, trying to read that and see what we have going on here. And, we'll see if that ends up being the case. Shout out to Crimson, says good morning. Good morning to you too, Nick. Ashley Johnson in the building. Glad to have you guys in here. We appreciate y'all. My little brother Bulls Daily is in here as well. Crimson says it shouldn't take much to beat out Braxton. See, and that's the thing. Crimson, I love you, and we disagree, but Braxton has not been nearly as bad as what you try to make him out to be. Now, I will say this, right? people who try to use just PFF grades to try to say that Braxton Jones has been some top level tackle. It's like, because while I'm not as down on Braxton as Crimson, I'm not necessarily high on him either, right? I think when you look at people who try to talk about like Braxton, like he's some terrible player, he's not that either. But the problem is that his ability to handle the pass rush is something that definitely has held him back considerably, right? And you're only as good as your weakest spot on the offensive line. So I do think you got to look at that in some shape, form, or fashion as well. You can't just overlook that when it comes to Braxton. And that's why we're having this conversation, right? Like, there's a reason why everybody looks at left tackle as the position the Bears have to upgrade. It's because Braxton's not bringing something there, right? He is bringing a lot. Run blocking is pretty solid. Pass blocking leaves a lot to be desired. Penalties leave a lot to be desired. His inability to handle the pass rush is crazy, especially considering his size. All those things have led it to be like, when you look at Braxton, it's disappointment, right? It's disappointment because Braxton should be further along at this point heading into year 4, and he's not, right? So, that competition is going to be fun and interesting to watch who comes out on top of that, because I tell you what, if he does end up losing that starting position, I mean, he's still going to get snaps this year. Braxton Jones isn't going to be completely out of the rotation, but heading into free agency, of course, he's going to want to play as much as possible, right? Running for early morning show. I appreciate the commitment and dedication. Best Bears content show in the game. I appreciate that, Tony. Appreciate that. Bulls Daily says Azie played damn near 80 snaps in one season at right tackle, only allowed 2 sacks on his side. Everybody who was talking crazy, stop talking so much. I mean, and that's the thing, right? I think that was the thing with this draft, is that the expectations were really high because of the names around where that were slated to go around the Bears pick. But I think what a lot of draft experts and mock drafts and even ourselves here at Chicago Bears Central overlooked was, all right, what if teams say, hey, fuck that draft position. We're going to take who we have number 1 on our board, regardless if they're slated to go in the second round or not, right? And that's where a lot of things kind of went left at. And the Bears seemed like but it seemed like they were prepared for it, right? Like, I do think Azie Tripillo is somebody who, while didn't get a lot of the pre-draft acclaim, I think a lot of Bears fans are going to see very early on, this kid is good, right? And watching this tape, he's good. He's physical. He brings basically everything you look for at that tackle position. So can't be mad at that. Can't be mad at that at all. Spoiler. I just talked about that. I don't know, Cornell, if you were just coming in. I did talk about the fact that Darnell Wright moving to potentially moving to left tackle, that being on the board really does change a lot. It really does change a lot. And I think that would be the biggest sign that Braxton Jones is not going to be a starter next year. I believe the offensive lineman coach will help develop Wright one and take the position. He is the best in the league for the offensive lineman coaches. I'm not worried about it at all. And Troy, completely agree with you, right? That's where a lot of this comes in at, is that the Bears finally have coaches in place that you can start looking and trusting how they can develop guys, right? So we'll see what happens there. Having Dan Rouchard there instead of Chris Morgan, it makes a lot of difference when you're trying to sell us on these tackles that need to develop, right? It makes a big difference there. Bears Junkie says not having Chris Morgan will be a plus for every offensive lineman. Completely agree with you. Tony also says this legit helps me get more information without bias. I've been able to use all of y'all arguments to counter narrative and show objective thinking that people don't look at CBC the game. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. I mean, that's the one thing that I think we bring a benefit here, is that we all have different perspectives and we don't all try to push as you saw with me and Steve-O, we ain't afraid to go at each other and are thinking, but you do get a varying different degrees. That's why, we all did mock drafts. We didn't do one team mock draft. We all did our own mock drafts, right? So I think that's a big thing. And that is what we, one of the things that we do offer here that's really good, right? Some other shows, even when they do have a lot of hosts, all preach the same thing because they think it makes their point stronger, and they end up looking stupid. And you guys can figure out who that is. Nonetheless, on that one, go watch some tape. But with that said, the battle at left tackle, our right tackle, however it ends up shaking out, the starting tackles are going to be really interesting, because I really think Ben Johnson, Dan Rouchard, that they have this thing of they really want to figure it out, right? They aren't going in to training camp saying, hey, Darnell is only a left tackle or only a right tackle, right? I think they're going into that trying to figure out the best combination. Of course, We know Drew Dahlman's starting. Ben Johnson's already made no question about it. Joe Tooney, Jonah Jackson starting. So it's really trying to figure out that tackle position. I think they're going to put in the work to really try to find the best tackle and the best set of tackles to really take this on to the next one, man. But with that said as well, also in the draft, one thing that we've heard coming out of the draft, and we heard this kind of the day after the first round, is that there are apparently a lot of calls of teams trying to move into the early teams. And after the Chicago Bears drafted Coltson Loveland, those calls stopped, right? And so we've heard of that. Michael Rappaport came out and said this. Before the draft, I'm starting to hear that a couple of teams are really, really trying to move to trade up. I heard the Texans were, I heard the Broncos were. No one's going to tell you who they were trying to trade up for because obviously they don't want someone else taking them. The only thing I can tell is that is like when the call stopped. The Bears take Coltson Loveland at 10 and a bunch of calls stopped. I was like, wow, he was maybe the guy. I don't know specifically who those teams are trying to trade up for. I do know this. We all thought Tyler Warren was the dude, but it seems like Loveland was kind of the dude, right? Now, that is something that is kind of unexpected, right? And that goes to how posturing is a big factor in drafts, right? Teams are trying to posture. They're not trying to show their hands, right? So I think leading into the draft process, the reason why, the Bears leaned into the Tyler Warren rumors was because maybe they always had Coltson Loveland higher on their board than Tyler Warren. And that is evident by the fact that Tyler Warren was there and they took Coltson Loveland, right? And I think that a lot of teams around the league probably also believe that the Bears were super high on Loveland, and it ended up being, super high on Tyler Warren, and it ended up being Loveland. And so, not to say that just because other teams were interested or willing to trade up, that it all of a sudden makes that pick even better, right? Because I think when you watch Loveland's tape, you see it. The guy has the dog in him, right? While Tyler Warren may be better in possession and some things like that, and maybe a better athlete, when you look at the route running, when you look at some of those things, he brings a lot to the table when it comes down to that. And so, I think you've gotten a nice ability to have a better pair with him and Cole Kmet, which I still do think Cole Kmet still needs to be looking over his shoulder. Cole Kmet better have a big season this year, right? But I think that the Bears did a lot better than what some people are giving him credit for, right? But we'll see what happens down when it comes to it. I think overall, Loveland is a guy that apparently had a lot of suitors in this draft, and the Bears went out and got him. Now the thing is, it has to be proven on the field. I'm done giving up a bunch of hype. Right, I've said this before. I have no more hype left in me. I'm excited, but my excitement is not going to become expectation. I need to see what we have on the football field, and hopefully Loveland ends up bringing that. Man, hopefully he brings that. So we'll see what happens there. But Loveland is a guy that the Bears better be right on, and I think that they better damn well get that pick right, and he better be a dog, because if he's not, there are going to be a ton of people that look at it and say, hey, the Bears got it wrong. Ryan Poles reached again and got it wrong, right? And we'll see what happens in that, right? I'm not saying that that's going to happen for sure. I'm just saying overall, you got to look at some stuff like that. Crimson says, I'm just tired of seeing my QB in between Braxton and the defense. Listen, completely that's what I said. I'm just not as down on him as you are, but I can't knock you for being down on him at all, and I wouldn't do that. Maybe I was wrong about the overpay criticism, at least on that pick. Listen, it's all going to be told between the lines, Crimson. It's all going to be told between the lines. And we'll all see who was right, who was wrong. Were the Bears right or were the Bears wrong? Doug says, I think that if Kelvin Banks was there at number 10, Braxton was getting traded probably day 2 of the draft because he would have been the pick. It's possible. We'll never know, though. We will never know. Wee says, what's your take on the Nick Chubb Buzz Hayes? I have a whole video out on that, but just to kind of recap that, if he's fully healthy and you're not giving him a crazy deal, I wouldn't even be mad at a 2-year deal if it's reasonable. But this isn't outside of what the Bears have done before, right? The Bears have done, think about Yannick Ngakoue coming off an injury. The Bears gave him a 1-year deal, and, they ended up not holding him. Keenan Allen, traded for him, had him for 1 year, ended up moving off of him, right? So the Bears have done this type of thing before, as far as being willing to bring in a veteran with maybe some concerns around him and seeing if it works out or not. And if that's the way that they want to add some depth to the running back room, I'm not mad at it. It really does come down to what the what the price tag is on that. I think is a big factor in all of that. But I also want to look at this, right? So the Bears have some pending free agents, right? I want to look at how the draft really kind of what it says about these pending free agents, right? Now, it's not the end all be all because you got other drafts, you got free agency, but let's start off with Jaquan Brisker, right? One of the things that I thought that the Bears were going to do and that should do is that they should prioritize safety, right? In this draft, I was one of the first people to start talking about safety consistently. I remember somebody even left a comment once when I was like, "They got to draft a safety. They got to look to safety." And they're like, "Hey, do you know something we don't know? Because why is safety such a big concern of yours?" And it's like Kevin, even outside of the injury, Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker are both free agents at the end of this year. All right, and I think because of that, you really need to address and prepare. And the Bears, it's not that they didn't draft a safety in this draft. They did take a safety. But they took a defensive back that can play multiple positions in Za Frazier. But they didn't go out there and really prioritize a surefire safety, right? And I think when you look at that and what it means for Jaquan Brisker, is I think that the Bears, there may be, again, complete speculation on my part, is that there may be some confidence that Jaquan Brisker and his ability to stay healthy. Now, the Bears aren't going to extend him probably until the offseason. So they're still leaving themselves some space to see how that's going to go naturally. But I do think that that Jaquan Brisker, the fact that he's not played a full season yet because of concussions, but when he's on the field, he's a dog. But I do think that this is a year where they are really trying to see, especially under Dennis Allen, who's going to use Jaquan Brisker in some very special ways. What does Jaquan look like? But I do think that it's not going to be a surprise if the Bears keep Jaquan Brisker, and it shouldn't be, right? It's just if he can stay healthy is the question there. But Jaquan Brisker is a player that I think they didn't make any moves in this draft or free agency to where it clearly shows where they're leaning at with Jaquan Brisker. I think they're leaving themselves some space one way or another. And I think when you look at the injury history of Jaquan, that's fair, right? Joe Thuney. This is a guy that I do expect to get a contract extension, but I do think that the fact that the Bears haven't done that yet does point towards, hey, let's just make sure that there's not a fall off, right? Like Joe Thuney's up there in age. He's still been very productive even at his age there, right? So there's no problem with that one, right? But I think overall, like when you send a 4th round pick in this draft, which that 4th round pick could have been the difference between you getting a higher up running back and some of the other things that you did, especially with the way that that Ryan Poles moved up and down that draft, it shows some confidence. Now, Thuney is in the final year of his deal, right? And there was an expectation that he would get a contract extension almost when they signed him, but it's been really quiet on that front so far. Now, I do think that Thuney's going to get a contract extension probably after the first or 2 preseason games. I wouldn't be expected, or I wouldn't be shocked if that's what we see happen there. But I think that Joe Thuney, he's going to get probably another 1 to 2 year deal when it comes down to it to put him on the same timeline. Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman, and Jonah Jackson would all be on that same timeline if you sign Joe Thuney to a 2-year contract extension, which then puts you at a place to where if you need to revamp your offensive line with younger pieces or anything like that, that's where you can start doing that. So I do expect Joe Thuney to get a contract extension, and the Bears not really going after a guard really in this draft. Like, don't get me wrong, they drafted a guard, right? What was the guard's name that we drafted off the top of my head? Not going to remember it, so let me consult my notes. Luke Newman is who we drafted, but Luke Newman's played multiple positions, right? Kieran Amagaje is still a player that can play multiple positions, but I do think that it points towards, Thuney's going to get his contract extension. One of the other players that's a huge question here is Kevin Byard, right? And Kevin Byard played great for the Chicago Bears last year. I think what the little bit that we got to see of him and Jaquan Brisker on the court together were really good. On the field together were really good. He started every game in 2024, and he was a real big part of the Chicago Bears defense. And that's even with a lack of creativity with the Bears defense, like Matt Eberflus had. I think now you're bringing in Dennis Allen. He's a lot more creative in how he uses his defensive backs and all of that stuff. But Byard's entering his final year, right? I do think that, they didn't look for a replacement in free agency. They didn't look for a replacement in the draft. So rather Ryan Poles thinks that they can replace it in the draft or free agency next year, I do think that Kevin Byard still has an opportunity to maybe get another contract extension here, a short one, right? I think everybody, if you're going to see veteran contract extension with the Bears, I think you're going to see them all 2 years, 1 to 2 years. I think that's the most you're going to see, because I think the Bears are really trying to set themselves up to see what it looks like, and give Caleb Williams that extension at 3 years that they can. He's extension eligible there, so we'll see if that's what they do. But I do think the Bears are kind of lining things up to where they're prepared for that if that comes to be, right? So Kevin Byard is another guy that is clearly going to still be a high level priority with the Chicago Bears this season, and I expected that, right? Healthy, unlike Jaquan Brisker, even though he's a little bit older, and I think inside the box, outside the box, using him on some blitzes, especially with Dennis Allen, that's going to be on the menu there. Andrew Billings. Andrew Billings is in an interesting place, right? Because he's not going to be a starter, because that's going to be go to Grady Jarrett. So you're going to have Grady Jarrett, Javon Dexter there, right? And then you have Andrew Billings here. You went out and got Shemar Turner, who Shemar Turner does have some penalty issues, things like that. But make no mistake about it, Shemar Turner still was expected to become an NFL starter. And so Andrew Billings is in a place where he's still going to be able to do his things. He's coming in, he's going to play swing defensive tackle like he was meant to do when we signed him. But I do think that the future's starting to go with Grady Jarrett, Shemar Turner, the rise of Javon Dexter, that we can start seeing that Andrew Billings is probably going to naturally phase out, right? I think that's the thing's going to happen. That's no knock on Andrew Billings. Big Billings was a dog for us when he was on the football field, and you saw how much that everything dropped off for the Chicago Bears defensive line the moment that Andrew Billings went down. But I think what the Bears have done this year is that they've added in some cushion. If that happens, they've added in another big body in Shemar Turner, who can play multiple positions on that defensive line, that's going to be able to come in here and really perform well for the Bears. So I think that's what you're looking at for. I think Andrew Billings, he's a pending free agent. If things go the way that the Bears want it to go, I think this may be the final season of Andrew Billings in the Bears uniform. But we'll see. We'll see. But I think that rotation you have there is going to be a very nasty rotation. So we'll see what happens there. And then lastly, Braxton Jones. I talked about that to start off the show. I don't think Braxton Jones is going to come back for the Chicago Bears. Anything barring like a Pro Bowl level season, just because I don't think the Bears are going to pay him the money that starting left tackles get in the NFL. And I don't know if he's going to be in a position to take a team-friendly contract. I think you look at Tripillo coming in, Kieran Amagaje, also the tackle depth that's coming in next year's draft. I think that this is Jones' last opportunity to really prove himself. And if he doesn't, I think that the Bears are going to have their eye on left tackles in next year's draft. And I think Braxton Jones' time here is starting to come winding down to end personally. But that's really how I look at the pending free agents by the Chicago Bears, right? We got a handful of them. We'll see how it shakes out. And overall, we'll see what they do. Don't be shocked if Terrell Smith goes to safety. This Bears organization hasn't really changed a lot of players' positions. You're not the first one to bring that up. But I don't see safety when I look at Terrell Smith, personally. Now, it's not to say that Dennis Allen has converted players before, so there's a chance of that. And Terrell Smith when he's on the football field, he's been really good in coverage. Man has left a little bit to be desired at times in man coverage for Terrell Smith. But again, that's just nitpicking. Terrell Smith has brought a lot, and I really do like Terrell Smith a lot, man. What's good, Hayes? Appreciate your insight on the draft. I really like what the Bears did in the draft, getting players that might not have the flashy names, but on tape and highlights what they bring. And that's really what it comes down to. Like, we as fans can get caught up in the names. I want my front offices to be a bit more caught up in the skill, right? That's what I want them to be caught up. I don't give a damn about the names if it comes down to it. I don't care about that. So, we'll see what happens when it comes down to that overall. But, I think you have to go out there and get players that fit your system. The names are added bonus. But if you get players that they can become the names. If you get the right guys that develop, they can become the names. So I love that. Don't get too caught up in it. They have to have Billings. He's the only one tech they have. All others are three techs. They don't have to have Billings. And I think when you look under Dennis Allen's system, he's been able, with the way that he moves things around and the way that he gets creative, it's not necessary to have a one tech. It's not. Now, I'm not disagreeing with your overall football analysis, but I think when you look at the age, the way that they moved on, unless they can't, it's not to say that they can't find another one tech next year as well. I just think that, you're looking at that, the Bears have clearly started moving in a different direction. It's year 3 for Pickens. He was hurt, so we can't say. Yeah, but at the same time, it's year 3 for Pickens, but even when he's healthy, he hasn't been in the rotation. right? Now, this is a different coaching staff. And with a different coaching staff, may bring a new view and new motivation. So, let's not count them out 100%, but I do think things are starting to trend in a little way. So we'll see what happens when it comes down to that. We'll see what happens. Soon as Big Bill went down, our D run game did. Oh, that's a fact. Like, it fell off a cliff. 100% fell off a cliff once Billings went down. I get the feeling that the Bears draft board didn't fall well for them at all, but I think they adjusted well and still ended up with a pretty good. Yeah, they got a pretty damn good draft, right? I rated the draft a B, which I think it could very well go to maybe a B plus, an A minus, depending on how these guys develop. So, we'll see what happens when it comes down to that. Kevin had more tackles than anyone on. No, he didn't. He didn't have more tackles than TJ Edwards or Tremaine Edmonds. Now, maybe if you mean defensive backs, maybe there, but he didn't have the most tackles on our defense. I heard that Billings could be looking to retire next year. Could be. It's another thing. Dexter's going to have a huge season. Javon Dexter is going to have, and he's going to have to be better in the run stopping. Like, that's one of the biggest holes in Javon Dexter's game. In run defense, he has a lot of room for improvement, but with the way that he likes to be a dog and put in that work, I wouldn't be surprised if he can figure out how to do that. So we'll see what happens there. So we'll see. But all right, guys, I love you guys, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following us at Shy Bear Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, ChicagoBearCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. We'll see you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Chi-Town up, bear down, y'all.